Nice.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry.
I just got the notification it's live.
Yeah, I'm getting it as well. So welcome, everyone. We've made it to Wednesday. Now, as I said last week, Wednesdays are switching up a little bit. We have switched from feminist book club to almost like a MENding book club. I don't know. That's what our last social turned into. We're now exchanging books, which is really fun and exciting. But today we are talking with some of our MENding facilitators that have been trained through the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center about engaging men in ending gender-based violence. So today I have brought Stu onto the live stream. Stu, welcome.
Hi, thanks very much, Alicia. It's awesome to have this opportunity to be here.
I'm so happy that you're able to join and to you've been doing a lot of work on your social media, even pre and post your involvement with MENding. So can you talk a little bit about why this is important to you? Why is MENding important to you and engaging men in this conversation?
Wow. I'm gonna say I think in hindsight it probably started when I was a kid. My mother and my sister are two very strong human beings who, made sure that I was a respectful young man growing up. Didn't always work, but then I have a partner in life who is also very supportive, and it kind of started back when the abortion right to choose and pro-choice and stuff was coming into the news more. I think it was about a couple years ago that it was all on social media and stuff, and my wife and I were talking about it, and she said, you're very supportive when we have conversations, but you're not loud enough. And I thought, oh, okay. And she said, you're a quiet, nice guy. And I thought that is very interesting. So then I started to try to post more, and I thought, okay, I need to learn how to not be a quiet, nice guy. And I actually saw an advertisement for MENding when I was at the theater on King one night. And so I signed up for a workshop, and that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
It's always interesting how things come together and how things work sometimes. And, like same kind of similar thing with KSAC with me getting out of my master's and everything kind of just falling into place. And, there's a reason why these types of things happen. And so, you did the MENding program. What were some things during that program that really stood out to you?
The biggest one was learning the definitions around assault and violence and racism and phobias are very much set up so that men can absolve themselves of any kind of responsibility if they think they're a nice guy. All these definitions are very centered on the overt actions. And that there are just seeds of these things that men do that they just don't realize. And then if it's pointed out to them, it's hard for a man to deal with that, because it's, we're taught to defend any attack against our morality. Like that's part of that man box patriarchy thing. So I think learning that it doesn't have to be overt to have an impact. And that was the big thing for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I resonate so much with you have to defend yourself and defend your honor, and it just really adds to kind of this toxic level of, I am so good that I just need to defend myself because you are the one attacking me.
Yeah, and the fact that it's, it ties in nicely to all of the stuff that's happening in media now with Black Lives Matter and BIPOC Lives Matter, and that, I'm reading the book White Fragility right now, and I could insert male fragility into every sentence. I could take out the word white and put in male, and that it's this social construct of if you don't fit the overt definition, then you're fine. And really it's so much more than this overt thing. It is a system, and gender-based violence is a system, and patriarchy is a system. It's not any one person. And it's really, I guess MENding also just said, like, you really have to lean into that work, and you have to be okay with being uncomfortable in certain conversations, which is something else that men aren't good at. Men aren't good at leaning into things because they don't get taught how to do that. So
I want to get back to what you said about leaning into things and why that's so difficult. But when you talk about overt actions of racism or gender-based violence, you know, what are those overt actions that first come to your mind versus the more hidden actions that you're thinking about?
Well, the most extreme obviously is rape and physical sexual assault, that kind of stuff, where a man has actually physically hurt, touched, or invaded someone's space. Those kind of in your face things. Catcalling could be overt. But then there's the less overt things like a joke, right? A locker room conversation where the stuff that's brushed off as, oh, boys will be boys. And that is it goes back to that idea that, okay, there's acceptable, unacceptable behavior just because you're a boy and you don't know any better. And it's like, well, teach them better. So I think that's and yeah, it's hard to know unless you're the person who's made uncomfortable by it. And then you, as the person who's made uncomfortable by it, have to feel empowered to tell the other person, like, that's not okay. But but how many people are comfortable with telling a man that what they're doing is not appropriate? There are very few people in this world who are comfortable with that. So, and I think that's why MENding is important, because if it's men telling other men, that's the message that has to go. That's where the message has to come from. It has to be men telling other men, because women have been doing it for long enough, I think. And I steal that idea from Jackson Katz.
Yeah.
He says, Jackson Katz says, women have been doing this work long enough. It's time for men to step up and do it. So.
And to go back, why do you think it's difficult for men to lean into these conversations, whether it's about being accountable to your actions, or whether it's about thinking about what sexual violence is and how these more hidden or less overt acts contribute to what we consider the continuum of harm?
Great question. And I was it's actually trying to think, like, what kind of questions is Alicia going to ask me? I think it's hard because, well, for me personally, it was going through life thinking that I'm one type of person, and then having someone approach me and point something out that I've done that completely goes against the type of person that I think I am. That's hard to hear. And part of my journey I manage mental health issues on a daily basis as well. And I think even just that idea of with my anxiety and being challenged on something, my anxiety ramps up, and that's hard to deal with. And then of course as a man, or at least the box that society puts us in, is that men aren't supposed to talk about things that bother them. So it's hard to lean into something when you feel like you have to do it on your own. Like, and you can get caught, if you're doing it on your own, you can get caught in a really negative downward spiral where no work gets done. Whereas with MENding, it was it was great to be in a room with like-minded men and be able to share experiences and have empathy to lean into that. So I think it's hard to lean into it when you do it alone, and a lot of men think they have to do it alone. So that's probably why they won't do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Or the work doesn't get done because they enter into depression or other kind of mental health issues, or they try to fix it by other means.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Other means that are more acceptable in the man box.
Yeah. Alcohol, drugs,
Yeah.
Going out and partying,
Mm-hmm.
hitting something, smashing things.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like showing your aggression, like, this is how I get my feelings out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Because showing emotion makes you less than a man, but the only emotions you're allowed to show are anger and frustration and
like dominant emotions that are seen as powerful
mm-hmm.
emotions. So, and they usually, unfortunately, those emotions get taken out on people who have nothing to do with those emotions.
Mm. We've been getting some comments as well. Michael on our Facebook, who actually did the MENding program, says that it says a lot that so many men are still comfortable when they hear sexist jokes, and that we laugh it off and we go, oh, was it really that bad of a joke? Like, oh, it's just a joke.
Yeah.
But these types of statements really have like profound impacts that lead up to, well, if you're okay with a homophobic joke or a sexist joke or a misogynistic joke, a joke that degrades women, if you're okay with that, then what else are you okay with? If you're okay with doing that in a public space, then what are you going to be okay with doing in a private space?
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like, I think what people don't realize is that you do show that to the people you're talking with, and it's very true. It's like, if you're okay with this when other people are watching and you can be held accountable, like what,
and
like
people laugh and agree with you for it, or they don't confront you with it.
Yeah, it empowers you to do more. And I think there was an infographic in the MENding program too, where it's that pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
I love that infographic. It just, so like at the bottom, it's the little seeds of toxic masculinity that, again, if you don't stop it here, then it goes to here. And if you don't stop it there, it goes to there. If you don't stop it there, it goes there. And it has the potential to just keep going up. Whereas if we stop it here with the less overt, the jokes, the comments, the ideas of what's appropriate and inappropriate, and if you stop and plant different seeds, right? Like, you have to, I think the other work is planting different seeds depending on what you want to grow, kind of thing. So I think those are like the toxic masculinity seeds are the weeds we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
Got to plant other stuff. So
toxic masculinity actually came up in our last conversation we had with Ryan, and I was asking him about it, like, just to hear, like, do you identify as masculine, Stu?
Yes, I do.
And so when someone says toxic masculinity, like, that has a personal impact on you to some capacity. And so, it's like, it's kind of like an immediate reaction to, are you saying that I'm toxic? What did toxic masculinity mean to you?
When I first heard it, I got my back up. And this is before MENding, and this is like, I started hearing about toxic masculinity and all that kind of stuff. I was like, well, I'm not that guy. There's no way. Because again, it was that idea of the overt stuff. And I was like, I don't do the overt stuff. And it was like, do I do the overt stuff? Do I do these things that aren't overt? And then so with MENding, it was that idea, it was that kind of awakening where it's like, it put that emotional response aside and listen to what toxic masculinity is. Because again, it's not a person. A person can be toxic. Like, men aren't toxic, but there is such a thing as toxic masculinity. There are behaviors and words and conversations and jokes that are toxic. And there are ways to identify those and change your behavior, to learn and change.
Mhm.
So yeah, when I first heard the term toxic masculinity, it was like, wow, that's abrupt, that's aggressive. And then yeah, you put that emotional response aside, and it's a little easier to learn and hear what people are saying.
So I want to ask you now, how did you put that emotional response aside? Because I think that is a huge step to understanding gender-based violence, sexual violence, toxic masculinity. What were the steps that you took, the leadership that you took to put that emotional response aside?
There are a lot of conversations with my wife in before MENding, during MENding, and even now. I had to learn how to put those emotional responses aside, or started learning how to put those emotional responses aside before MENding as well, because of my mental health. Because my anxiety does not manifest as what people might think stereotypical anxiety is where people have a panic attack and just run away. I choose the fight response when I get anxious, and I stand my ground and I get angry. And so I had to learn how to put that emotional response aside so that I could be present in the moment and look at it rationally. So, and it's been an ongoing journey too. And MENding became a big piece of my mental health puzzle as well. Being able to learn how to have those conversations with other men was the big step too. And knowing that other men wanted to have these conversations. So.
Not to put any pressure on you, but that was a really important answer. Sexual assault center Quinty was really excited to hear your answer for that. And Michael on Facebook, I think this is a response to the jokes, or perhaps, and I hope that a lot of men are not comfortable with it, but they conform because they don't want to be socially ostracized by other men. And I think about the article we read this morning.
Yeah.
And about wanting to fit in, wanting to be with the bros, because as humans, we crave social connection. It's part of our genetic makeup. We like people. We like connecting with people, and we like people who like us. And in the hockey world, hey, if you're athletic and you're with a group of people that support you and are here for you, but yet there's some not so good things happening within that.
Yeah, and I think the tough thing with hockey, growing up as a young boy in Peterborough, we're home to the Peterborough Petes, whereas a lot of famous Petes went on to the NHL. We are a proud hockey town, but the level of status that professional hockey players are raised to, I think is heads and shoulders above any other professional sports. I think the next closest second might be a basketball player.
I would say in North America.
In North America. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Thank you for that qualifier. Yes, because football is the sport of the world. Soccer. Yeah. But I mean, there's so many young boys who want to be an NHL hockey player. They want to be a professional hockey player. And there's so much that goes into the world of hockey. There are so many layers to the world of hockey, and there are so many people involved that, I mean, sports is character building, but if it's going to be character building, it has to be the right type of character building. And we have to teach the leaders of those boys what appropriate character is. Right? Like, to go back to Jackson Katz, that's what he does. He doesn't do sensitivity training. He trains leaders, and he trains leaders from essentially a MENding lens. And if those leaders, if you want to be a leader in sports, because that's where we push boys to go, right? If we're going to keep pushing boys into sport and you want to be a leader in sport, then you have to be the right type of leader. And if you're not willing to be the right type of leader, then you need to get out. you can't be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same wherever men are leading boys, they have to be the right type of leader, and they have to be willing to do the work. They have to be willing to get it wrong too.
And they have to be willing to admit that they've caused harm or that they've done things wrong. Because in the article that we read today about the OHL and Sarnia players saying things like, well, we never saw it and we don't do that now, so we're good people.
Yeah.
That was one of the last paragraphs in that article. And it's just like, that doesn't help.
No.
That it doesn't help society and the systemic issue that we have with hazing, and not just with sports. We see it with fraternities as well. And you know, not to out him, but my fiance was part of a fraternity, and they may not call it hazing, or they may not tell them what to do, but you know, if you're down in a basement and they strip you naked and put a bottle of vodka there, give you a nod and lock the door, there's some things that are implied with that. And so it's almost like they've had to go covert, or like, is that the right word?
Yeah. And that becomes even more problematic, because if
they know they're wrong.
They know they're wrong, and they're just trying to cover it up. So it's like, as soon as we don't, if we stop seeing overt stuff, then people say, well, there's not a problem because I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have another tough question for you.
Okay.
Michael on Facebook was asking.
Oh, Michael's going to get extra bonus points today.
Do terms like fragility or toxicity, or I'll even add simp, which is now in there from the incel movement, harm our efforts to reach the people we need to communicate with?
Yeah, they probably do. Like, I think he's asking if they get in the way.
Yeah, do terms like fragility and toxicity harm our efforts to reach out to people?
Okay, yeah, I think they do. I think they do, because again, it's that emotional response, right?
Mm-hmm.
The emotions always get in the way. Emotions keep us from being rational. And learning how to have a better relationship with our emotions through emotional intelligence training, which stops after kindergarten. You know,
sometimes it doesn't even start before kindergarten.
Exactly. And I mean, like those terms, like if someone, I think 5 years ago, if someone had came up to me and said, you're a fragile male, I would have really gotten my back up.
Mm-hmm.
Or said, again, like if they had to call me a toxic male, I would have been like, what are you talking about? There's no way I am. But I know that I've displayed those fragile moments and those toxic moments in my life.
So it's like you identify that what you've done, those are the words.
Yeah.
But yet, you know, it's just interesting to me, because I feel like in a way we need those very radical statements for people to actually listen. And like, in a way, it's like what you're doing is toxic. What you're doing makes you fragile. And I'm not saying that you're definitely not the only one. I think I think white people right now are grappling with those terms of being fragile white people, about being Karens. And it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of determination. It takes a lot of effort to step back from that emotional response and be like, okay, what's the message here?
Yeah.
But the thing is that, you know, when we define what fragile masculinity is or toxic masculinity is, you know, it's a big definition, but it's not going to create as much awareness as being like toxic masculinity, talk about it, instead of, oh, the behaviors attached to being a toxic male will insinuate type of response.
Well, because people, it's not what you're saying, it's how you say it. With a lot of messages, like it's how you come across and how you talk to people about it, it makes a big difference. And so, terms like toxic and fragile and simp are gonna turn people off. And I don't know what the solution to that is. I think you will never have control over how other people react or what they do. I think you only ever have control over what you do. Again, impact versus intent and all this other stuff, but I will only ever have control over my learning and my growth. I can influence other people's learning and growth, either in negative or positive ways. I hope they're always positive. If they're negative, I hope they come and tell me, so that I can make those changes. And I think the other thing too is that we're like, people in general, not just men, aren't allowed to be wrong. They aren't allowed to, like, this idea of conviction, like sticking to your guns and sticking to your beliefs, can get in the way of people learning as well, because they think, well, if I change my mind, then I'm weak, or I'm stupid, or I'm just, following the crowd. Like, why can't someone change their mind if they've been given new information or been educated in some way?
It's a really hard question. And I think in a way you kind of answered Michael's question. It's how you talk about it. Because if I came up to you and said, you are a toxic male, you're going to be like, no, I'm not. I'm Stu and I'm amazing. How dare
I'd be like, you taught me. No, I'm not. You were my instructor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I come using the calm, curious, and supportive approach that we talk about with our bystander intervention training, and being like, when you say that, do you think that's helping a situation? Or where do you think that statement comes from? Because I don't think that you believe this, insert sexist joke here. So why do you think you say it that way?
Yeah.
And, asking those types of questions and then connecting them to,
and the other person's going to get emotional.
Oh yeah.
Right. The other person's going to get emotional. And I think that we're emotional people. Human beings are emotional. And the hardest thing for us to do in any situation is to detach from our emotional response and try to look at it rationally. We can do it like hours, days later, but sometimes too, I think if you do it hours, days later, then great, come back to it. Like, people also don't realize you can come back to any situation. You can come back to conversations. My wife and I come back to conversations all the time, right? Like, there's things we need to talk about, and it's like, okay, we've talked about it. We're not necessarily at a resolution for this, but
we may not have all the answers at that exact moment.
Yeah, but at least we started this conversation. Like, why? Like, never look for an end to it. Like, it should always be dynamic.
Michael was saying, excellent point. People's attachment to being right is really causing a lot of harm.
Yeah,
because we value intelligence and the letters behind your name more than life experience. And let's root it all back to colonization, right? And what kind of knowledge we deem as valuable. How many letters and credentials you have behind your name matters more than life experiences.
I think the three, like it is ego and pride will get in the way of learning. And I teach high school, and for the first 3 years of my career, I tried to have all the answers. And the day that I finally was able to say, I don't know, was one of the most liberating days of teaching, where I could stop trying to be the know-it-all at the beginning, at the front of the classroom. So those, like, being able to say, I don't know, I think people need to embrace that a bit more too.
We have another comment on Facebook from Jessica. I've also heard that some men are afraid to speak up and support women because they might be attacked, with some reference to a previous act. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And that's why, like, I think the another thing I learned in MENding was really what the patriarchy is. And that's the thing, when I first started hearing dismantle the patriarchy, I was like, what is this about? And the patriarchy is a system that sucks for
everyone,
everybody. It sucks for men. And the patriarchy is overt for everybody else except men. And then it's subvert for men, where it's the man box idea. I think you and Ryan talked about man box in your chat, where it's like, this is what men should be. And that's a system where, again, if for some reason I feel like I'm not fitting in the man box relative to my male peers, I might start to display some toxic behaviors to fit into that box.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the patriarchy sucks for everybody.
And, let's unpack what the fear is, what they're afraid of, whether they're in this comment it said to a previous act and that you may have caused harm. That is really scary to think about, and to, essentially label yourself as a perpetrator. But I like to reframe that thinking as being accountable to your actions. If you try to suppress it, if you try to say, oh, well, I'm doing great things and I'm a good person, but you're not being accountable for what you said in the past. We see Tina Fey, we see Jimmy Kimmel coming forward and saying, hey, you know what? I did some really bad stuff on a TV show, or asking really inappropriate questions, and I'm owning up to it. I'm being accountable, and this isn't centered around me. It's just me talking about it. And I think it's really important to unpack what is that fear, and why do you think that fear has implanted itself in your mind?
Ooh, deep.
I know. Have we finished our coffee yet? What is that?
Yeah. I think the fear is attached to ego and pride. I think it for on the most basic, simple level, if I want to take responsibility for anything I may have done, but I also fear that I will be looked at differently and I will let down people around me because of something I may have done in the past that I wasn't aware of, right? And it's and because of who I want to be. Like I want to be a certain person. But to be that person, I have to acknowledge everything, right? I have to acknowledge whatever I've done. So I have to acknowledge my dark side. Like you can't
What dark side are you referring to there?
The dark side of the force, Alicia. You have to acknowledge, like you have to acknowledge the entirety of who you are to move forward and be the person you want to be.
We are all complicit in sexism, even women, was another comment that was just made. 100%. As Stu was saying, we're all part of this system. And it's not until we recognize what the system is, it's not until we recognize the intersecting forces of this system, like racism, sexism, homophobia, like we all need to recognize. Like I was definitely in an early part of high school, like all part of like body shaming and slut shaming. And, I obviously feel horrible about it. But then thinking about, why did I do that? Why did I say that, oh, you're terrible for engaging in these actions, but yet lots of other people were doing it? Why are we criticizing certain bodies over another?
Yeah.
Me reflecting on that gave me the information that I needed to understand that, like, this is all part of a bigger system.
Yeah. And even when I was younger in school, and I can even recall, like I was the victim of bullying behavior. Not to any kind of extreme where that you see or hear about today,
like we read about in the
article. And I exhibited bullying behavior, right? But again, it wasn't. It's when I was a kid, when we were talked to about bullying, it was the overt stuff, right? Like the kid who walks by you and punches you in the back of the head every day, or the kid who like stops you in the hall and roughs you up for your lunch money, right? Those stereotypical, the cliche overt bullying behaviors. It's like, well, I don't do those, so I'm not a bully. It's like, well, nah, you're a bit of a, you're a bit of a jerk in school, Stu, when you were younger. So
I know that we wanted to talk about mental health, and you've been very vulnerable about your mental health struggles. And this is all part of toxic masculinity, because when it comes to men and mental health, well, they're not synonymous. I think there's been a lot of progress in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
With Now Let's Talk, and men being part of this. And June 16th was Men's Mental Health Awareness Day, but it's how men are supposed to deal with their mental health that makes it toxic. I'll hear your statement in a second, but I'm just going to read some quick facts from CAMH. Today, approximately 5% of male youth aged 12 to 19 have experienced a major depressive episode. And we saw that in the article we read this morning. 1 in 10 men will struggle with depression in his lifetime. Rates of substance use disorder are very high in males, 6.4% compared to 2.5% in females. Men die by suicide at a rate 4 times higher than women. Men are more likely to develop schizophrenia at a younger age. How are you supposed to deal with mental health as a young male? Drink, party.
Talk. You're supposed to talk about it. I've been having a lot of conversation with friends about mental health lately, but especially like with COVID and quarantine and this might be the only social contact that some people have as a Zoom meeting, right? Or a FaceTime chat. Talking about it is the ultimate first step, I think. I am not a qualified psychiatrist. I am just a biology teacher. But I know from my personal experience that talking is that first step. And it might be that talking is the only step you need. That could save your life. For some people, it's more. I always think of mental health as a puzzle that has pieces that or you could use the analogy of Jenga, right? You're always moving blocks around and it's tricky, but Jenga eventually falls down no matter how good you are. But with mental health being a puzzle is I have these static pieces in my puzzle that I've worked at over the last 5-10 years. And now there's pieces that are changing. They're being put in for a bit. Okay, that doesn't work. I'll take that out. I'll try this. And yeah, MENding became an important puzzle piece, and being able to talk to other men became an important puzzle piece. I take medication for my anxiety. That is a puzzle piece that is going to stay. I tried to remove it and it didn't go well, so it's back in and it's staying there. But yeah, it is a journey. All of this learning can never end, and it's like you have to take that first step. The first step is talking. And again, because men aren't given the space to talk, they will stay silent, which leads to all those statistics you just read off there. So
I feel like the youth nowadays, those
youngsters
have a great language system that allows a conversation to open. So whether you're just sharing an article on your Facebook, it's not necessarily saying like, I have struggles with mental health, but like posting about it can potentially open up a conversation.
Yeah.
Things like #relatable, or like, or just like sharing something on your TikTok, or seeing other people on TikTok, on social media, has really given a voice for men's mental health struggles. And to talk about that, alcohol and drugs and sex are not ways to deal with it, and that there are other ways that you can work through your mental health. And I think, the article that we read this morning, he talked about the mental health struggles that he went through, the depression that he suffered, the suicidal thoughts that he had. It just, and as like a star hockey player too, right?
Yeah.
It's so important that we open up these conversations and talk about our struggles, just like you have today.
Yeah. And we can't deny how important being social is to the individual. And there's nothing scarier to a social being than feeling alone, even when you're surrounded by other people. Because being alone physically is one thing, but being alone emotionally and mentally is crippling. And if you can't talk about it, then if you don't feel you can talk about that, you will always feel alone.
So Stu, as we're wrapping up today,
Mhm.
I know we've gone through like so much, and we probably have another 3 hours of content we can go through and discuss.
I'll do another check-in later on.
Yeah, we could do
Yeah.
that. Is there any last words that you want to say, whether that's to the men that are listening today or to anyone that's listening out there?
I think it's just you have to make the decision to want to do the work. And you have to be ready to be uncomfortable, and you have to be ready to be wrong. But I'm sure that if you want to do the work, there are going to be people who want to support you in that work.
Mm-hmm.
So, take that first step. There's lots of people around.
Amazing. Well, Stu, thank you so much for joining us today and for opening up this conversation. We've really had quite a few people tuned in throughout this.
Awesome. Good.
So yeah, it's really awesome. And I thank you for being so vulnerable and talking about your mental health struggles, your medication, the bullying that you experienced or that you even perpetrated yourself. It's all about accountability, and that's kind of the one of the steps to being an effective leader and engaging other men in this conversation.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and being willing to facilitate these programs at KSAC. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was good to have that. It was like that next step in my learning. So. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So if you're looking for support, the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center does support all genders, including men at our center. So if you're needing someone to talk to, our 24-hour crisis line is available at 1-866-298-7778. Our texting line is also available at 705-710-5234. Thank you to everyone who's saying thank you, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.